Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in Skeleton Crew Episode 1. So Skeleton Crew is an homage to 80s classic kids films such as the Goonies and the Explorers, but the filmmakers also said that they drew inspiration from the pirate serials of the 1940s. See, like all great Star Wars, this show is able to take elements that feel both familiar and new, while also helping to fill in the gap of what happened between this and this.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
And this first action scene is packed with Easter eggs, so let's get right into it. But first, I want to remind you guys that we have a huge Black Friday Cyber Monday sale happening right now at our merch store, and we're doing 2 shows this week, one in DC and one in Chicago. And we also have a 20% off sale on tickets for our entire tour, but I'll give you more details on that a little bit later in the video.
This is where the fun begins.
So, the Star Wars intro features some new faces. We start on R2-D2, appropriate since this is a kid-friendly show. This is followed by RX-24, the droid that pilots the Star Tours ride at Disney, who is voiced by Paul Rubens. Now, this droid also popped up in the Garsa Sanctuary in the Book of Boba Fett, and he is the bus driver later in the episode. Then C-3PO, followed by his maker, Darth Vader, and then Anakin Skywalker pod racing. Again, this is kind of an homage to how this show was made for kids, like The Phantom Menace was. And then we see the truancy droid that we saw later in the episode, a Mandalorian helmet, and then we see SM-33, the droid they find on the ship, who is voiced by Nick Frost.
Basically, no one else has a better idea, so f*** it.
But we'll get more into him in our video about the second episode. So this opening is very similar to the show Ahsoka, which began with simple text on screen to let us know the time period that this show takes place in. It feels very old school with like an 80s fantasy movie vibe, you know, like the movie Legend or Black Cauldron. But really, this is just a replacement for the standard opening crawl that apparently Star Wars never ever does anymore. So the premise that the opening outlines is that the New Republic is in charge of the galaxy, but they don't have much authority in the Outer Rim. Now, the Empire was very good at controlling crime by kind of co-opting it, but the New Republic tends to protect member worlds and no one else, as we saw in The Mandalorian.
But we have a backlog of requests from member worlds that have priority.
So, this premise that the Republic is expanding into the Outer Rim and then running into pirates is also very similar to the premise of the excellent High Republic series, which takes place hundreds of years before this show. This was also George Lucas's original premise for the sequel trilogy, that the fledgling Republic's main antagonist would be a pirate syndicate run by Darth Maul.
But that's so much better.
Yeah, I know, buddy. So, let's break down this great opening. First, I love how space starts off soundless, but then we hear muffled sounds. Remember, space is actually totally silent, but Star Wars is usually very noisy with lasers, music, and explosions. This entire opening is lifted from A New Hope, and we're going to point out the many similarities as we go along. First, obviously, we have a small ship being attacked by a more powerful, larger force. The airlock tunnels that attach to the ship are mimicking old-school pirate planks, but this window tunnel design seems inspired by this tunnel in the game Super Metroid, a game where you fight space pirates. Oh, and by the way, I love that they included this little detail that the ship's cannons would still be active, and how the best way to take them out at close range is to use pirates with grappling hooks and small detonators, because firing at close range would damage your own ship. Then, just like in A New Hope, we see soldiers getting behind cover, waiting for bad guys to enter through a hole that they've just made in the ship. Now we get a lot of focus on one particular guy who looks up as he hears noises outside. Then the bad guys enter through the door and the firefight starts. The fruit here in the foreground is a Melu-run, a fruit that first appeared in Star Wars Rebels. And there are also a lot of Star Wars species in this opening. The guy who gets shot in the eye then shrugs it off is an Ishi-Tip. The dog-faced alien is a Klatooinian. Oh, and this alien here with the pirate scabbard is your mom. So Doug, so far, are you liking skeleton stew?
Did you say skeleton stew?
Did I? So Doug, so far, are you liking skeleton stew? Yeah, I guess I did. Sorry, I've been like super stressed out about the holidays lately, and normally whenever I get stressed, I want to like squeeze my face on one side and clench my jaw, or I just like nervous eat all the time. Like I have a lot of bad oral fixation habits that are tied to stress.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm pretty much always munching all the time, but I'm a little dog.
I know, so like I needed something to help me forget all of my bad oral fixation habits and replace them with the positive habit. So that's why I started using Fume, an award-winning flavored air device that's a sponsor of this video.
Does that use vapor or something?
Nope, not at all. It's not electronic, there are no batteries to charge, and it does not have pods filled with potentially harmful chemicals. Instead, it has these small plant-based cores that are infused with natural flavors to create natural flavored air. See guys, Fume contains no nicotine, it's not addictive, and it contains non-toxic flavors. Instead, it has plant-based flavors like spearmint ice, cinnamon hearts, and my current favorite, crisp mint.
Oh, that's why your breath smells so nice.
Oh, I thank you, but mostly I just like that it still gives me something to reach for when I feel anxious. It even has movable parts for fidgeting that make an incredibly satisfying sound. And guys, Fume continuously invests in third-party studies to ensure the safety of their products, and it's backed by doctors in the USA. And maybe you don't have a bad oral fixation habit, but you know someone who does. Fume is a great gift to help them change their habit today. After all, Fume has served more than 300,000 customers like myself, and you can be their next success story. So this holiday season, you can give the gift of better habits with Fume. Head to tryfume.com/ScreenCrush and use the code ScreenCrush to get a free Fume topper when you order your Journey Pack today. It's the perfect addition to make your gift even more special. And if you're lucky, you could even win one of Fume's limited edition gold-plated devices this holiday season. Again, that's tryfume.com/ScreenCrush or scan the QR code on screen right now to get yours today. Now back to Skeleton Crew. So this one is a deep cut Easter egg. This one is a Schistovanan. Now this species originally appeared in the original version of the cantina scene in A New Hope, but back then it was just an off-the-shelf Halloween mask that they used to save time and money. But in the special edition, George Lucas replaced this alien with a new alien called a Ketwal. But now I'm glad that the werewolf in space is finally getting his place to shine as Brutus, who is using these dueling pirate pistols like a badass. The guy here who enters behind the pirate captain is named Gunter, which I have to think is a reference to the novel Ready Player One, where Easter egg hunters like myself are nicknamed Gunters. Lucasfilm, we feel very seen by you right now, and thank you. And get this, Gunter is played by Jalil White, aka Steve Urkel, which actually is totally appropriate because Urkel was clearly an alien who was sent to Earth to harvest the DNA of Laura Winslow, which I have to dive deeper into in a future video. Oh, by the way, the pirate captain also appeared in the new Star Wars opening sequence, and I haven't seen episode 2 yet, but my guess is that he's Jude Law's character, a former Jedi turned rogue. Here on the far left, we see a Whippet, and on the far right, a Snivian, followed by a Nikto. There's a chance that this Nikto is actually Thane, the pirate who appeared in The Mandalorian Season 3.
What, you can't tell your Niktos apart?
I cannot. Now, this whole sequence where the big scary man in the mask gets a dramatic entrance and then threatens a crew member while holding them by the throat is obviously lifted from A New Hope, right down to the leader holding the man up while he makes excuses.
This is a bulk freighter.
We're on a diplomatic mission.
He says the vault is magnetically sealed,
Why is your vault magnetically sealed?
just like the trash compactor in A New Hope.
I already tried it. It's magnetically sealed.
The alien in the background here is an Aqualish, like the guy who messed around and found out in the Mos Eisley Cantina. And these two aliens on the left are a Weequay and a Quarren, while this out-of-focus guy is a Trandoshan. And this is my favorite one. The guy on the far left here is a Gran. Now, they normally have 3 eyes, but he is wearing an eye patch, you know, because he's a pirate. And earlier, when he stormed the ship, he shot someone in his peripheral vision that he was able to see because he has 2 eyes. Now, the captain gives a big speech about their newest payday, but then Brutus just finds one lone New Republic credit in their vault. Now, notice how the money is adorned with the New Republic crest, which is the crest of the Alliance to restore the Republic with stars added around the circle. And then we get the title Skeleton Crew, which has a couple of different meanings. One, a skeleton crew is a small crew that mans a large ship, you know, like the kids on the ship at the end of the episode. But it can also refer to a crew of pirates that flies the Jolly Roger flag. Now, then we open with our protagonist, Wynn, playing with his Jedi action figures. Now, this is obviously to make us relate to him. He's playing with his Star Wars action figures just like us.
I got you now, Ben Kenobi.
Yeah, but he's also playing with toys like the Broom Kid in The Last Jedi.
But hold on, my friend, Broom Kid was not the first kid in a Star Wars movie to play with toys. That was actually Luke in A New Hope right here.
Kid was like 17 and playing with toys.
Not much to do on Tatooine. Wynn's room looks a lot like the cabins in the Star Wars hotel, you know, with all of these recessed shelves built into the walls. So I think the design of his house and the entire neighborhood has this great retro-futuristic feel. If you lived in the 1980s and you were making a Star Wars movie, then this is what you would have imagined the future would have looked like. Notice how these stairs also resemble architecture that we saw in, say, the Brady's home in the Brady Bunch. Now, at breakfast, he drinks green milk, and I wonder if that also came from the Thala Siren like the one that Luke milked in The Last Jedi. Notice how his school patch resembles an omega symbol, the last letter of the Greek alphabet that usually means an ending. Now, this could be because the school wants to decide Wynn's entire life by making him take a career exam before he's even hit puberty. So, right away, I picked up similarities to Wynn's life and Eliot's from E.T. They both have an absent parent, and the remaining parent is so busy working that they neglect their kids' everyday life. His neighborhood even looks like the Southern California hills where Eliot lived. Outside, we see an Ithorian walking a Lothcat. Now, we first saw those creatures in Star Wars Rebels, and I still think they look weird in live action. Notice how all the cars ride along these tracks. Now, this is very much inspired by Walt Disney's Vision of Tomorrow Utopia that was actually the original conception of the Epcot Center. Then we meet Wynn's best friend Neil, an Ortolan, the same species as the greatest red ball jet key player in the Outer Rim, Max Rebo.
I'm 30 minutes late, man. That's jazz time, man.
So the two of them pretend to be Jedi, and their entire duel is another homage to A New Hope.
You should not have come back.
You should not have come here.
And by far, the grossest thing I've ever seen in Star Wars, you know, this saga where people literally go into trash compactors and have monsters with like gross teeth and stuff. The grossest thing I've ever seen is this rancid sugar rubber stuck to the back of the droid's head.
You mean chewing gum?
No, I mean rancid sugar rubber. I hate gum. But I do love designing merch for you guys. Right now, we have our Cyber Monday sale on 20% off everything in the store and discounts on our new merch bundles. We just dropped new parody shirts like Grogu, Boop and a Beast, Evil will always triumph because good is dumb, and Marty McFly in Cloud City, an homage to this.
My name is Darth Vader.
We also have a 20% discount on all tickets to our live shows. We're in DC tonight and Chicago later this week. So come meet me in person and let's nerd out together, and we'll even develop a whole new ScreenCrush video together. Use our code SCTOUR for that discount. And you can also find out more updates on our free to join Discord where we nerd out together all the time, and you can also join our newsletter where we're always going to send you exclusive deals and updates. Now, Wynn reads this story on his datapad, and this is where I can only give you partial Easter eggs. Some of the frames here were just too blurry for me to translate, but I did get a lot of this story pieced together because I'm wondering if the greater story of the show is going to be reflected on this datapad story, or maybe if Jude Law's character will end up being the Jedi that Wynn is reading about. The first word here is the, and then the story layout is very much like a fairy tale, which is fitting for a couple reasons. One, Star Wars is very much based on a fairy tale structure. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away and Once Upon a Time are very similar. But also, by the time of The Force Awakens, the Jedi are once again relegated almost as a myth or a fairy tale.
Luke Skywalker. I thought he was a myth.
So the first page here reads, as best I could tell, the cave of blank was dark and scary, but the Jedi was not afraid. Now the next few words are very hard to catch, but I could definitely make out the monster and the darkness. Now the next page where the Jedi is fighting someone, I could barely read any of it except for in the top row in the center you can see the word Sith. Again, it's interesting that these stories showing the Jedi as good guys fighting the Sith are once again widely circulated on Republic worlds. Now later on, after he finds the ship, he's reading outside the principal's office, you know, like the Arabesh sign above says here. So these pages are all about a hidden Jedi temple. This one reads something about guidance to a fortress, and then this bottom part is more clear. Using the Force, they something and shatter the ground to create the soaring towers of their new home. And then the fortress something into the ground and time. And then the bottom is way more clear. With their fortress complete and their solace, they meditated together. Their connection to the Force and to each other getting stronger, they were a beacon in the darkness. And when the galaxy called for heroes, something did not hesitate. Probably says the Jedi did not hesitate. And then their fortress rose back up to the surface and they stood ready to fight for justice and peace. So this story is why, later in the episode, Wim is convinced that he unearthed a hidden Jedi temple. Remember, in the show Rebels, Kanan and Ezra found a buried Jedi temple on Lothal that they could use the Force to activate. I should also note that there are two stories that Wim reads. The other one is about a Jedi named Druin. Now this one reads, next Druin came across the paddock of something who was long gone, run off into the fields of Yatin.
Yatin? Like Sailor Moon?
You know what? It might be a reference to that. And then he took something from an old food trough and then something stranded. Druin felt a strong presence in the forest. He knew that he was getting close to the fearsome beast. He took out his lightsaber and held it ready as the beast lunged out of his forest and loomed overhead. So we're seeing how Wim wants to view himself as a lone Jedi Knight having these big adventures in the woods. And let's go ahead and round out all the Arabesh in the episode. This writing on the building reads Comm Center, and as we see later in the episode, the planet is surrounded by a barrier that prevents the kids from seeing stars. So communications would be a vital part of the planet's connection to the outside world. And this reads administrative. So what we're seeing is that Wynn's home world is just kind of dull. There's not a lot of fun for the kids, and everything is orderly and built just for a specific purpose. This sign reads station. This says at Aten Middle School. At Aten is the name of their planet. Now this one is a fun Easter egg to the prequels. This diner says Mel's, the name of the diner in the 70s TV show Alice, where one of the waitresses was named Flo. And remember the diner in Attack of the Clones? The Arabesh on that droid read Flo. So now back to class. Their teacher looks like a similar model to a droid tactical unit from the Clone Wars, which is appropriate. Droids are programmed for specific tasks, so this one is obviously programmed for thinking and logic.
That's not a career. That's what safety droids are for.
Now this kid is an Ithorian, like a hammerhead that we saw in the Mos Eisley Cantina. And this kid looks like his parents were a Rhodian and a bat, and he's sitting next to a Celestin. And then the undersecretary enters wearing this blue cloak. Now she is played by the great Carrie Condon, the Oscar nominee from Banshees of Inisherin, and this character is also Fern's mother that we see later in the episode. Now as when Etch-a-Sketch is a Jedi Knight, she name checks something called
In the Great Work.
Now it's interesting that this is the name the New Republic is using for their task of rebuilding the galaxy post-Empire, because in the High Republic novels, Chancellor So is building a series of what she calls the Great Works. And then we cut to Fern and KB out joyriding. Now the sound effect of their bike is also very similar to this one in Attack of the Clones. And when she drives between two buses, it seems like an homage to this scene in the classic Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Fern and KB want to drag race the local kids, and actually drag racing is in the DNA of Star Wars. George Lucas used to drag race all the time when he was in high school, and even based the final scene of American Graffiti off of his own near-death experience. Luke Skywalker was imagined as a local boy who likes to drag race his speeder, which is why he took so naturally to being a pilot.
Yeah, but isn't that kind of like I'm really good at driving a Corvette and so I can drive a jet?
Yeah, it is a little bit like that, but hey, much like Luke Skywalker, these two also need a power converter.
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Now notice how the entrance to their neighborhood looks a little bit like the entrance to Lion Estates where Marty McFly lived in Back to the Future. Little details like that are why we love making shirts like our Darth Vulcan. So in Fern's home we see this mural, and in the center we see the symbol of their school in the center of a circle. We see two humans, an Ithorian, and this guy with head tails that kind of make him look like a Togruta, the same species as Ahsoka Tano. Now also, this guy in black facing away, what's his story? I think it might turn out that the missing booty at the start of the episode is tied to this planet somehow. And if so, this mural might actually be important later on. Back at Wynn's, we see just how dull his life is. His dad is one of those movie parents who's always too busy to show his kid any kind of attention. Kevin! And he also discourages Wynn's creativity.
Bedtime stories.
Aren't you getting a little bit old for that?
So I already went through the translation of his story, but this page looks very similar to a Jedi fighting a Rancor like Luke did in Return of the Jedi. Now, notice how the barrier around this planet even gives this guy this kind of a gray look, like the world is so boring they can't even look at the stars and dream of going into space. Now, there's also a few cool details on his bike, which again, the whole thing is very 80s coded. There's this basket on the back, you know, like Elliot's bike in E.T., but also it has tassels on the handlebars. So this whole side adventure with a kid getting lost in the woods seems like a callback to the 80s classic Flight of the Navigator, when a kid takes a shortcut home and ends up getting taken away by a spaceship for several years. And of course, Wim speeding through the woods is a lot like the speeder chase in Return of the Jedi. I also like the small details like here when mud splashes onto the camera lens and how a poorly executed Akira slide leads him straight into the ravine. The symbol of the hatch here does look similar to the Jedi Temple drawing that we saw on his data pad, which is why he associated the two.
Yeah, sounds like he could have used a jump to conclusions mat.
At the school, the kids are taking their exams, and there's actually a disturbing parallel between this shot and the clones learning in Attack of the Clones. In each instance, children are being given jobs to do instead of choosing a job to do. And it's showing us how the Republic is enforcing the children to conform. Outside the principal's office, Wim compliments Fern's bike.
It's totally wizard.
And that's exactly what Anakin's friend Kitster called his pod in The Phantom Menace.
This is so wizard, Annie.
And then we go to Neil's house where his siblings are watching a hologram TV show. So, couple things here. George Lucas was obsessed with holograms as a piece of future entertainment. For instance, this is how the workers watch TV in THX 1138. But also, this particular hologram is footage taken directly from the Star Wars Holiday Special, when Chewbacca's son Lumpy watches a circus act in one hologram. And by the way, if you haven't seen it, I can highly recommend a documentary about the special called A Disturbance in the Force. It is great. So when they meet Fern and KB, she tells the story about the people being trapped underground, which kind of seems like an homage to this scene from the Goonies.
They blew up the walls all around him, and he got caved in, and he's been there ever since.
That's bury them alive, trapped underground forever.
Now, if you haven't seen it, The Goonies is an 80s classic about kids looking for a pirate treasure while running afoul of real criminals, and this show is heavily influenced by that story. And then Fern pulls a Tom Sawyer and gets Wim to dig out the hatch for her.
Oh, well, it's too bad. We're not strong enough to dig the rest of it out.
This is less fun than previously indicated.
Now, the Mark Twain reference here is also appropriate, since Tom and Huck spend several chapters in the book off on an adventure imagining they are pirates. And the sound of the hatch opening sounds like this sound from the carbonite freezing chamber in Empire. And before we get into the final act of the episode, I just want to point out something that I think is important. Wim chose to look for the Jedi Temple instead of studying, but he didn't do that because he wanted to go find the temple and have an adventure. He was trying to prove to his dad that he was right. His dad is so emotionally distant that he just wants his approval. And we see the same thing with his new friends. He's the outcast, the person who causes trouble, but he just wants to belong. And then we see the droid SM-33, which I think is short for Smee, like Captain Hook's right-hand man in Peter Pan. Finding a one-eyed droid is also a parallel with Mikey finding One-Eyed Willie in the Goonies.
That's why they call you One-Eyed Willie.
And the scene when the kids are sealed inside is taken directly from the kids being trapped underground in that film.
So maybe if we bang on him hard enough, if we make enough noise...
and Wem walking through the tunnel alone with the flashlight is very much like Elliot when he first discovered E.T. And just to round out the 80s references, this whole show is also a nod to films like The Explorers, where 3 kids build their own spaceship, and then also an homage to Space Camp, where a group of teenagers are accidentally launched into space by a robot that's trying to make Joaquin Phoenix happy.
Put Max in space.
And that robot, by the way, was voiced by Frank Welker, who voices Fred on Scooby-Doo. Not a Star Wars fact, just thought it was cool. And right here,
hello?
That's a musical cue that is very much like the score of the Goonies. Here. And the ship rising up seems like an homage to the George Lucas-produced Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, as the kids see stars for the first time.
What are those?
So I also have to point out that this theme of kids escaping their drudgery suburban existence also seems like an homage to George Lucas, who dreamed of leaving Modesto, California to become a millionaire and to have a career as a filmmaker. So guys, that's the first episode. We're going to have our episode 2 breakdown out to you tomorrow. We're still catching up from the holidays, but remember to check out our deals and our new merch bundles and our Cyber Monday sale. You can get tickets to our live show for 20% off and join our Discord. It is so much fun. And don't forget to check out our exclusive deal for Fume with our link below. So what did you think of the episode? Let me know your thoughts on our Discord. You can at me on Twitter, Blue Sky, or Threads. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.